There you go. Whoosh. Okay.
25 people watching.
We can't sit here. I can't.
You just don't know what that they So then they said, okay, guys, let's do so we go and stands next to her. She takes her. It goes like that. So, I mean, she definitely plays a role. This Joe. Last night when we were playing cards, Joe Wright said, "Where did you stay?" And I said, "We stayed in Sheridan." But he goes.
Give the timer.
You never camped out. Nobody's setting up this one. Yeah, absolutely. How are you? He just told me that. 15 years. Yeah. Yeah, you told me the same. So you they took it out. You can see where it was.
Can you move? Something like that.
We're going to get started in about a minute. Everyone can sort of take their seats and check your phones out. I'm very much looking forward to getting through this debate.
Excuse me, I just want to tell you that anything you say during this will be right here on the live stream and go out to the entire whoever's watching.
Okay. Keep it positive. No heckling, no shenanigans. And I just want to welcome these three gentlemen to the debate and congratulate them for running. I have index cards on the front table. If anyone wants to submit a question that they want me to read after the moderation is over, if you could keep those questions to subjects that I haven't already covered in moderation would be great. If you actually want to come up to the podium and ask a question, I would ask you also to keep those subjects, not personal attacks, to keep them to subjects that were not addressed. We do have a second debate in 2 weeks from now, and anything that's not covered this evening, we can certainly tackle the next time. And with that, on the show. These first 3 questions each don't need a rebuttal. I'm just going to go down the line. Start with George. Please state your current name, your current occupation, and tell us briefly why you're running for mayor of Greenport Village.
Okay, my name is George Hubbard. I'm an auto mechanic by trade. I'm the mayor, current mayor right now. I've been on the village board for 16 years. I've enjoyed serving all of you, trying to make our village a better place, trying to beautify the village with work that I've been doing. I appreciate the job. I have a lot of fun in it. I enjoy going to some events with the kids, giving speeches, interview with the fire department, community picnics, a lot of all different functions that the mayor gets invited to. And it's been a pleasure for me to go and represent Greenport in a positive way and give positive encouragement to everybody, all the events that I go to. I really want to, some projects that we have in the works right now, I'd like to see them completed. That's what I want to try to take care of if I'm re-elected again for 4 more years. And that's really what I'm hoping for. I want to keep working for everybody that's here because, I'm honored to do that and I really enjoy it. Thank you.
Okay, good evening. My name is Richard Vandenberg, and I am running for the office to be in service as mayor. Since actually my occupation is I'm an attorney, I guess, by training, but most of you may know, I opened up the Greenport Harbor Brewing Company in town 14 some odd years ago. The reason why I want to be mayor is because since I've been a young boy, my parents always taught me that you should work in service of your community, giving back wherever and whenever you can. That lesson is reinforced as a young boy in Scouts, and I continue to learn to give back to my community on my way to becoming an Eagle Scout. So that service and working in service of the community and giving back whenever and wherever I can continues today. I've been in the community for 34 plus years, always tried to lead by example. I believe that the most effective leaders do just that. I believe that my record and my engagement in the community stands on its own and speaks for itself. And from early days as a young attorney, a young father, serving on various committees and organizations in the community, from the East End Drug Task Force to Cub Scout pack leader, the Boy Scout troop chairman, I've always tried to step up and be engaged. With the support of my family, we built the brewery and renovated the old firehouse. But I continue to work to be engaged in other organizations as well. And I can tell you, I want to bring stability and transparency to our government and our governing process. I want to make sure we're all included in the decision-making for our village. And I want to do all of that in service to our community. I have the skills, I believe I have the experience, I have the drive, and I know I can do the job.
Good evening, my name is Kevin Stussy, and I just want Good evening. My name is Kevin Stussy, and I live on Clark Street in Greenport. My family and I decided to make Greenport our home long before I decided to run for office. This is a very special place for me. I am currently a development consultant and operate independently. I spent many years as an executive for several different large companies, 2 publicly traded companies and 1 large development firm, which is the largest owner and developer of affordable housing in the country. Greenport is a crossroads, and in my short time here, I've seen the development pressures all of us are concerned about. I've lived that in my career, and I've also lived that in my life. When I was growing up in a small community in Northern California, when we first started there, as I was born in my first 10 years, we had farms, orchards, and all of that was gone by the time I graduated high school. Spent some time in cities and eventually decided to escape to raise my daughters with their mother, and we moved to a small town in Idaho. That small town faced many of the same issues we're facing here, dealing with affordable housing, infrastructure problems, overdevelopment of hotels, and a lot of the same things that I'm hearing from my neighbors and friends that I've met over the past few months since I started walking around with petitions for the moratorium. If you elect me, I promise an open local government, transparency, and community meetings to get deep engagement. I care what each and every one of you want for our community.
George, what are your key qualifications for the position of mayor? How would you describe your managerial and decision-making style, and what differentiates you from the other candidates?
Okay, I think the village is a very complex business with the amount of water, sewer, electric, road department, fire department, that there's a lot to take on and to control and oversee as all that happens. It's not like a town supervisor has minimal things. We've got a very complex village, and it just takes a lot of time and devotion to work towards this and keep track of all that. And I think the experience of working on the budgets, I was awarded the fire department for 22 years, so I know the fire department very well, what goes on there. I'm a 45-year member of the fire department, so I've got a lot of experience there. The budgets that we've worked on over the past 8 years have been minimal tax increases. We try to keep the line on it, use grants for other things, and just the knowledge and the connections made through going to the East End supervisors and mayor's meetings, interconnecting with other politicians, trying to bring county money. We use county money at the end of Clark Street, Brown Street, and 4th Street for a sewer project, and just meeting with those people, being involved and saying, hey, look, can you help us out with this project? I think the connections are a very valuable asset to move forward with the village and trying to continue bringing money in and getting projects done. And I think that's what makes me qualified to try to continue the job.
Same question. So, yeah, I believe that, as the mayor said, Georgia said, that, it does require a certain level of skill to run a village. And that village ultimately has to be run and looked at as a business in some respect. But I also think the village needs to be operated in a way that is inviting and completely assistive of our community. In other words, when you walk into Village Hall, you should be treated as though you're being treated walking into a hotel or a resort, where they ultimately act as a concierge to make sure that whatever your problem is, whatever your issue or question is, that they are going to find the answer for you, and not simply potentially being dismissive, gruff, ultimately not helpful. We need to make sure that the village begins to operate in a way that is absolutely assistive to our residents and to our business members in a way that's constructive and forward-thinking. I have, been running a business. I actually started out as a managing partner in a law firm, managing attorneys. Developed the Greenport business. Ultimately, have run that business for a number of years. We have 70+ employees. I'm also finishing up my term as the president of the New York State Lawyers Association. We have 428 members, roughly 3,000 people, and ultimately we lead in a way that is progressive, forward-thinking, benefit-oriented, So I feel like the job that I could bring, the structure that I could bring to the village would be to redefine how we engage with our community, making sure that everyone actually has an opportunity to have a voice, be heard, and understand that they are a valuable asset within our community.
I believe my experience in business will be enormously helpful for the village. As I said earlier, we're at a crossroads. There are many things that we're facing. Some of those things are developers not just knocking our door, but they're sitting in our living room, and they're trying to make decisions for us. I've sat across the table from big developers, and I know how to deal with them. Any of you who have been in any of the recent village meetings, whether it's with the planning board or also with the trustees, I've stood up to these developers who say they know better than we do. I don't believe they do. At the same time, I have the business experience to deal with the financial balance sheet. And one of the skills that I've had throughout my life and my career is dealing with problems and with change. We have many things that we need to deal with. There are a number of items that are going to need to be repaired or completely replaced over the next several years and into the next decade. This is why I spent well over a month walking, knocking on doors, and pushing for this moratorium. I did, in a very short time, something that hadn't been done, but had been talked about for many years. When I put my mind to doing something, I get out there and do it. We passed the moratorium. The law is now in effect. We're pushing forward. And as far as small businesses and the need to keep those going, it's happening. A number of small businesses are changing over, including Kate's Cheese, which is a wonderful local person who just retired, and it's been bought by Frank, a wonderful new neighbor who's opening a new store there. I think there's a lot we can do, but we need a plan in order to do it, and we need to make sure that we protect the pocketbook of the city and each one of ours as residents.
This is for all of you. We'll start with George. What do you think are the 2 to 3 biggest challenges facing Greenport, and briefly, what is key to navigating through them successfully?
So could you repeat that one?
What do you think are the 2 to 3 biggest challenges facing Greenport, and briefly, what is the key to navigating through them successfully?
Okay. Well, right now we have, we're talking about the development, what's going on downtown. As a board, we've been working on stuff for almost a year now. We have not gotten that completed yet, but there were code changes and stuff to protect the proliferation of motels, hotels, and restaurants and bars in the waterfront commercial. We've had several different ideas that have not been able to come to fruition yet. One was an overlay district, one was creating 2 separate zones downtown. To do that, to make sure we protect what's left of the working waterfront, what's going on downtown. We've also worked on parking's been an issue in Greenport for 50 years. We're trying to come up with ways of doing something about parking. We've actually proposed redoing Moore's Lane, the fireman's track up there, and getting the shuttle service running, so employees can park up there instead of in the village of taking up parking spots in residential districts in downtown. We also have a project that we're working on is connecting Sandy Beach and Safe Harbor Marinas. We've got 400 boat down there, we've got 2 restaurants, and we have 26 residents that live on Sandy Beach that do not have sewers. We've been working on that for about 4 years. We're very close to it now. We have contracts that are being written. Safe Harbor is ready to give us an easement through their property and connecting all those areas into the pump station on that place, which would be good for the environment and everybody around. It would protect Sterling Harbor and the local waters, which is a big project, and we're getting close and getting that completed. Hopefully within the next year or so we can get that work done. And those are just some projects I'd like to see finished.
Same question.
Yeah, same question. I think the 2 things that face the village that are most critical are the pressures that we are seeing from outside relative to the development. The working waterfront is our biggest concern, and is our biggest focus. I believe we need to double down on the investment of what that working waterfront should be relative to preserving the character and the authenticity that Greenport has always known and loved. That area of our village, supporting the marine aquaculture business and related businesses that should thrive there, creating an opportunity for educational opportunities for our next generation to learn trades and be able to find a way to have a job in our area and stay here, continue to live here rather than leave the area. Of course, that means that we have to have housing. There has to be an opportunity to avail yourself of reasonably priced, safe housing. We need to really keep an eye on the Airbnb process, because the Airbnbs have come in and ultimately taken a lot of our housing stock away. The second home and vacation homes. Ultimately, those people have a right to own those homes, but the Airbnb business could be the undermining of our structure and our security of our next generation. I think the most important thing to do is to bring back real life, and that would mean continuing to incentivize and support small businesses, family-owned businesses down in the village, as well as continuing to figure out ways to make sure that the residents are not feeling crowded out, over-congested, unable to park where they want to. All of that is just built on design and opportunity to figure out solutions by engaging the public.
My single biggest goal over the next 4 years, if I'm elected your mayor, is to put a plan in place, deal with our infrastructure, and go for funding. The federal government enacted a massive $1 trillion infrastructure bill just in the past year. In early November, Proposition 1 passed in New York State. That's an additional $4.5 billion. I believe this village needs a plan. We should have already had our hands out to both the federal government and the state government looking for funding. We should have been getting funds to make repairs on all the things that we need them for, whether it's the bulkheads that are going to age over the next several years, the docks, the fisherman's pier that is starting to fail. These are things that need help. We also need to take a look at revenue generating items. Things like what we're charging tourists to come in for the summer and park their fancy boats out there. We should be comparing against other places, looking at ways to drive revenues instead of simply looking at cutting costs. When one takes a look at only cutting costs, you end up in a situation where you have even deeper problems. We need to be putting our hand out there and asking for funds. This past year, the governor enacted a new grant program that we could apply for last year for $4.5 million for Eastern Long Island. We did not apply. This is something, if I'm elected, I will immediately start the process of applying for in the next several months. It's time to put a plan in place, get things fixed, and make sure that you and I are not having to fund things off our backs as taxpayers, and that we're looking to others to help supply the funds needed that are available for a designated, economically disadvantaged community like we have.
There are residents within our Greenport zip code that are ineligible to vote despite being vested in the community, having their kids in Greenport schools, for instance. There are business owners also vested in the community who are ineligible to vote. Why should an exception be made for you to hold the actual office of the mayor when you have only recently retained a Greenport Village address to satisfy your eligibility?
I understand the question. I know it's been a hot topic for a lot of people. 34 years ago, I've been here after 34 years, and after 34 years, last year I decided to run for mayor. I've been involved in the community for 34 years, but really 2 years ago, I started to look for a home to buy in the village. I shopped and visited a number of properties. I actually put in a number of offers, and I was consistently outbid by offers that were well over asking price. So to date, I haven't been able to buy home in the village. I did decide to run for mayor, so it really then became a question of the form versus substance of what my objective was. It's not to take over and go crazy and run anything into the ground. It was really basically to try and lead and develop a plan that the village could be proud of and we could all work towards. So it really becomes a form versus substance. The form says I have to legally declare my intent to live in the village. And I did that. I ultimately found an apartment that was affordable enough for me to pay rent. I opened up a utility account. I changed my registration, my license, my cars, my voter status. I even changed the address for my legal license to the village of Greenport. So I took care of the form aspect and in terms of satisfying the legal requirements. But I know people are more interested in the substance of my relationship with the village. And as I said, after 34 years, I feel like I've established a significant basis to say that I will and I intend to live in the village of Greenport. If you think about it, you could say Greenport is essentially 1 square mile of ground. I bought a piece of that ground 14 years ago. I've been paying taxes on it. I've done what I can. I put my heart, my sweat, my tears, my blood into that ground. I've nurtured the roots that we put down there. I've been involved in other organizations in the village as well. So I can say that ultimately I stand behind the fact that I will indeed live in the village of Greenport if I'm elected there.
Do you have any comments or rebuttal? Moving on. Kevin, you were instrumental in drafting and coordinating the petition for a moratorium on any development within the commercial, retail, and waterfront zones for 6 months. Why was this a significant endeavor for you? And for the other candidates, do you support the moratorium? Why? And we'll start with Kevin.
I believed it was something that needed to be done. I took the time, the energy away from my work and away from my family to knock on doors. What I thought would initially be maybe a few minutes at the door and get turned away or possibly get a signature ended up being genuinely one of the happiest times of my time in Greenport. People invited me in. I sat down in the living room, spent 30 minutes, an hour and 15 minutes in one man's living room. I sat at the kitchen table with somebody that was second generation here for 45 minutes. I heard that people felt the same way that I felt, and we were all very concerned about letting developers make decisions for us. We need to update our local waterfront revitalization plan. The document that is on file in the governor's office is from 1996. That is before the iPhone was invented. Think about that for a moment. There was a lot of work put into updating LWRP in the last mayor's administration. 12 years ago now, 2010 and 2011. That document sat on the shelf. It sat on the shelf until I went out and did the work with every one of you in the community to get 200 signatures and to come into Village Hall, fill the place twice, and demand that action was taken. If you elect me mayor, I promise you that I will get things done. I may not always be right, I will lean on other people for advice when needed, but we're going to get things done. Thank you.
George, do you support the moratorium and why? Or why?
Yes, well, I've been back and forth on the moratorium. When it first came up, I was trying to get the village board to work on the code changes, because the end result of the moratorium is we need to change the code to protect what we have going on downtown. Right now, we have planning and zoning codes that are in effect, that could be used to hold some of the development that was going on there. We definitely do need to complete the LWRP, which we are working on now. There's one committee from that came from the moratorium. There's also another committee that's working on code changes, which is also moving towards the goal that we need to accomplish for the village. There's another committee that's working on infrastructure in the village, which is tackling parking issues, water, sewer, those things. And so the moratorium, it brought that all about, brought it all to a head, and that is being worked on now. The moratorium per se, if it continues for a long period of time, could be detrimental to the downtown business district. Somebody wants to open a store or do something down there, it could take them a year to 2 to get something in the works to get it done, if they change the use of the property. If it's not as of right use, they have to go before planning and zoning, and that cannot happen during the moratorium. Also, we've got certainly one lawsuit from downtown from the moratorium. I'm afraid there'll be more that will be coming up if we continue with the moratorium without an end game and getting something accomplished beforehand. As we were told, we could have done the code changes first and then moratorium as a last resort. I think the moratorium came more as the last resort before some of the other stuff that the village board needed to get done. And I would like to continue to get those code changes done if reelected and go and do that. And we'll see where the moratorium goes. I would do whatever's best in the interest of the village. We don't need 10 lawsuits and costing the taxpayers, all you and myself, a lot of money in lawsuits that, per legal counsel, we could end up not winning the lawsuits if we override and continue with the moratorium.
Thank you, George. Rich has to answer that question first. Do you support the moratorium? Why or why not?
I don't support a full moratorium. I support smart planning. I think the mayor is pointing to a couple of the reasons why. I believe that this was a reaction to the fact that there was an inability to get the LWRP finished and updated. The plain matter, the plain fact is that unfortunately the village took their eye off the ball with regard to getting this LWRP finalized. So it is important that we continue to pursue it, and it did draw attention to the fact that we need to be focused on exactly doing that, getting that LWRP updated. But really, the question becomes, do we really want to risk, because we had a room full of people, do we really want to risk the fact that there could be somebody who brings a lawsuit against the village because ultimately there was a decision to pass an administrative moratorium back on December 2nd. So really there's a moratorium in place before we even pass the moratorium proposed law that is pending. I think that there's plenty of mechanisms by which we can make sure that the development that people are fearful of will not happen. None of it has happened. There's been cases where there are speculation that things are going to happen, but there are no pending applications for any large development. So I do think it's an overreaction and a rush to react rather than be proactive. And I think if we take the time and follow the process that we were told by Pace University, we had two excellent professors come down and explain how this process should work by engaging the community for as many as 12 to 18 months to figure out what it is the community wants to see specifically, and then decide how to proceed. That's a more intelligent way to approach this problem, rather than reacting, throwing up a law that is broad and over-encompassing and potentially causing liability and a real chilling effect in terms of what we can expect.
I'm frankly confused where the mayor and Rich both stand. The mayor was against the moratorium and then ultimately voted for it when the community came forward. When he was asked about it by Long Island Business Journal, he said he voted for it because the community came out. I now hear he has concerns about it. Rich, on the other hand, signed my petition on November 17th for the moratorium, with very clearly defined deliverables of what we were looking for as a community. The same thing that 200 other people signed. And now he's against it. I've seen emails on behalf of the bid, arguing for the doom and gloom of the village and all the concerns that we need to be worried about. I look at facts. The facts right now are nobody has the ability to file for a large application, do anything with significant change. We're a village of 1 square mile with very limited resources. We have things we need to take a look at. Skid Systems, one of the largest properties on the waterfront, was for sale. The movie theater has been quietly listed for sale for a significant amount of time now in the past year before being publicly listed. A number of other buildings on Front Street have been listed, as well as some on Main Street. There are things that we need to be concerned about, and we all need to work together to protect them. I'm prepared to protect them, and I'm not afraid of big developers and lawyers.
Rich, 30 seconds.
I did sign the petition that Kevin sent around because it said specifically there were 3 deliverables in that petition. One was to vacate the parking law that was a proposed parking law. The other was to enact the LWRP and form a waterfront advisory committee. And the third was to look at what our zoning laws should be in the downtown waterfront. That's what I ultimately supported. I can tell you myself, as well as many other businesses, that Kevin didn't seem to think endorse his idea, feel like they were necessarily sold a bill of goods on that.
30 seconds, George.
Yes. Okay, just to clarify how I voted on that, and it seems to be unclear. I was trying to push the village board to move forward to try to change the code and not do the moratorium. When we got the petition, everybody was screaming and saying you have to do this and all. I voted in favor of scheduling the public hearing, which was a unanimous vote, to move it forward so that all you people can talk to us and tell us what you wanted instead of the decision just coming from the board. That's how I switched my vote. For one thing, to go and get the public comment from everybody and working towards the goal of finishing these other projects.
George. Okay, moving on. George, we have seen many changes within the commercial and retail community over the years. Restaurants and retail stores come and go without necessarily changing the landscape of the downtown area. What kind of impact do you think a new hotel would have on the village, positive or negative?
Okay. Got it, okay. The downtown has changed a lot just because of a lot of little retail stores and stuff that we had have been closing up and they've become bars and restaurants. Over the past 20 years, well, working on the LWRP, there was 9 bars in the village 20 years ago. There's 43 liquor licenses now in the village, all over the place. It's changing away from the little nice shops that everybody would walk around to, and it's becoming more just hospitality, more like New Orleans or something. And we need to try to keep those places by zoning and planning, saying, we're not going to allow every place to turn into a bar. We have some control over that, we can do some of those things. Because we need people to be able to do more than just night entertainment. We need to do more stuff for the kids. The mini rare one that's going on up there. The ice skating rink, we've got plans trying to revamp that for next year to see what we can do to put a permanent rink in, to make something that is more viable than a temporary rink that's 20 years old, that just, with the climate change and what was going on, record warmth in January and February, we need to move that forward and that stuff, so the kids can do stuff in our village besides just the carousel, and the parents can have some fun, but also walk around and do stuff as a family oriented situation. One other thing I was thinking of, I forgot.
Just the
Okay.
hotel. That was the last part of the question, is what do you think a new hotel would do to the landscape of downtown?
I'm sorry, I saw.
What do you think a new hotel would do to the landscape?
Oh, the new hotel, okay, I'm sorry.
Yep, it's okay.
Yeah. The second design of the new hotel, which has a 2-story building in the front and not a 3-story building, which matches the other buildings to the north of it, I think looks much better. The 3-story part is in the back of the property, going along where the shipyard is and everything else. The problem we have there is that on that corner, there's 2 other 3-story buildings in the same area, and 2 other hotels in the past 15 years have been approved that are 3-story hotels. So precedent is there that these have been allowed, and again, trying not to get a lawsuit and everything else, what people have already said, you're allowed it here and there, and 2 of the corners on Front Main are 3-story buildings. This is one more, and they redesigned it to make the front part 2 buildings now. The front part would be a 2-story building, would match ideally to Bruce's next door.
Rich, do you support a new hotel? What do you think that would do to the downtown, positive or negative?
I said early on when the developer came to a particular meeting and talked about his vision, I think I was asked if I supported it or not. I basically said I support anything that creates positive vibrancy in the downtown business district area. I think the specific details as to the size and scope of this hotel continue to have to be negotiated and reviewed, because I think there is a place for the ability to have reasonably designed, appropriately sized micro hotels that could fit in our community. If you look at the Manhattan, that was a significant project that ultimately received approval, and I think it operates and looks good within our village. There are a lot of statistics that say that a hotel of the right size will actually help fund our businesses and our small businesses in our community. I know that people are concerned about parking and traffic, and those issues should continue to be discussed. But I think the thing that we missed most was we didn't necessarily engage the community enough to really have the opportunity to have roundtables, public town halls, that sort of engagement of our stakeholders and our residents to really be heard as to what we entirely as a village want to see. So I think it could be accomplished. I think there's plenty more work to be done. And in fact, I would leverage that potential development with the requirement that they build affordable, reasonable housing in other locations. Because if they want to reap the benefit of what the hotel would bring them, we should also make sure that they invest in our community in other ways that will support the other needs that we have, one of which is housing. I also think that we should impose a hotel tax where we can generate some of this additional revenue to help us with code enforcement, making sure our Airbnbs are not being used as daily hotels. So I think there's lots that could be done to find an acceptable solution.
Second question, do you support the hotel as a positive or negative for the village?
Sweet indulgence site?
Correct.
No. I believe we need to look at plans that make sense to the village. It's too much for too small of a piece of property. It's a simple no, it's currently designed. They don't have enough parking, the scale is out of scale, it causes issues for the firefighters that I've talked to about bringing emergency services over there. My neighbor Steve Clark will not be able to bring tractor trailers into the boatyard over there. And at the end of the day, honestly, I have concerns with a developer who says he cares about the community and he's let a building sit dark for a year and a half. I stood up to his lawyer at a meeting and said, how can you tell us you care about the community when you've done nothing with that space? You had an artist sitting in front of you for that past year and a half, selling photographs, crisp boats. Put them in there, open the place up, do something with it. Maintain the gardens. Angela took beautiful care of the gardens for her 29 years running student indulgences there. We spent 2 Christmases with no holiday lights on there. I'd like to understand why the mayor is having meetings with the developer suggesting it should go forward, and my other competitor, Rich, isn't holding a bid number to account for having empty space. It's important that we work together as business and the community for the betterment of this village. And I think that is something that we have to do, and we have to hold developers to account.
For Rich, in your opinion, has the village missed out on collaborative opportunities with transportation, such as the iconic Jitney passenger ferry, the LWRP, and the Hampton Jitney bus line?
So, I'm sorry, your question is about the client Jitney, the ferry, the boat?
Has the village missed out on collaborative opportunities?
I think the village has missed this opportunity, and unfortunately, I think it's a process yet again of the failure to effectively communicate. This proposal, as I understand it, I was at several of the meetings where the connectivity people were there. They basically came and proposed bringing back the ferry to the inner harbor. And the idea of it not being acceptable there was simply told to them to go figure out something else. So the discussions, as I understand it, moved to the visitor dock. And there's just been a real miss in terms of the level of communication between Peconic Jitney and the village in terms of, again, finding a solution that would be a reasonable, acceptable solution to allowing an operation that would bring more potential visitors to our business district from without the vehicles from Sag Harbor, and offering people to also travel to Sag Harbor from here. It bridges a gap between us and the South Fork that way that I think would be beneficial. And also would allow potential workers who may live in Sag Harbor to travel here because they may not have a place to live in the area. So I think it is a missed opportunity that we haven't figured out a way to sit down and explain clearly what we want the connectivity people to do, what exactly we want them to spend in terms of to make this happen. And again, just making sure we communicate clearly as to what our vision should be. I think it's also, again, another opportunity for a similar roundtable in our community to really understand whether people support it or not. And none of that has been done because I think there's been a real failure of communication.
Transportation and infrastructure are both extremely important. The ability to move people through the village and across the water and manage it effectively are all things we need to be looking at. This is exactly what the waterfront revitalization plan is meant to manage. There are things that we're not currently doing. We don't have a harbor master. We're not dealing with the moorings we need to deal with. These are all things we need to get into place. This is something that needs to be done, and we need to bring the community as part of the updating of the LWRP and the Waterfront Advisory Committee, and the community needs to tell us. But yes, I do believe that under the right circumstances, some sort of transportation by boat with the Iconic Jitney, if it makes sense to the village and for the people that live here and we're being compensated appropriately for it, should be considered.
George, same question, 2 minutes.
Okay. Trying to get more people here and not everybody driving their own car would be a big benefit. On the south, they call the South Shore Commuter Connection, where the buses run up and down. They go down early in the morning, then they'll go back out. They also do it with their trains. We don't have that here, the luxury here, for people to be able to get off from Riverhead, get on the train to Riverhead or bus, and get to where they're working in Greenport. They just get dropped off and they have to walk. If we get more people to commute that way with mass transit, it'd be much better for the parking situation that's downtown. Use Claudius as an example, 100 employees. If they could all come by bus or trolley or train and not all park their cars down there or carpooling, it would be much better. I work on Children Island, and I'm in that ferry traffic all the time. And a lot of the cars are there, myself included, are one person in a car, and the ferry traffic is really long. We are working with the ferry and New York State DOT to revamp the ferry view to make that more like what is down in Orient, with 5 lanes of traffic and get everybody off of the regular streets, off Wigan Street, last summer when it was all the way up to 9th Street. We're working on that project, and we're almost done with the Department of State, or DOT, excuse me, approval on that to move that forward, and that will alleviate a lot of the traffic down there. And it's also going to be better for people, better for the environment, and better for everybody with less cars on the road, and then they're not all jamming for the same few parking spots. So I think we can get that taken care of and get more train and bus service, which we try to. We've asked them do a model plan or to get to the South Shore. But the South Shore, it's such a huge span between areas that they're promoting it more and doing more there than they are here. As I say, it's just a short trip from Mattuck to Greenport, but still, if 10 people come by car from Mattuck to come and work locally in our stores, if they weren't coming by car, then there would be more room for residents and customers to get to those stores.
Kevin, this is for you. Do you think that the current code provisions relating to short-term rentals in the village are appropriate and/or adequate? If not, how would you propose to change the code to address and/or regulate rentals in the village?
I know the community spent a significant amount of time talking about this issue about 5 years ago. This is something that a lot of energy and effort was put into, and a law was drafted. The law that was drafted made the determination that the community did not want to see weekend rentals unless somebody was renting a room within their house. The problem with this law is it's not being enforced. We have a code enforcement officer who wears more hats than any person should. He's also the building department. He's the building inspector. He's supposed to be enforcing rental laws, and at the same time, he's supposed to be chalking tires on weekends. I can't even fathom how this is possible. There are ways that you can immediately put a stop to short-term weekend rentals that are happening illegally. In the community I moved here from, they partnered up with an organization that offers the software on a monthly subscription price that goes out. It very quickly determines who has properties that are being rented illegally within the village, and then files an action, and you have the ability to manage this in a much better way than having one person try to do 7 different things. At the same time, we need to bring our building department back, and we also need to look at code enforcement for parking. Thank you.
George, same question.
Okay, the village had numerous public hearings trying to move forward with the rental law, and also the Airbnb became a huge topic out here. It had not been an issue beforehand. The village board, with the 4 or 5 public hearings on it, listened to the public, took a lot of their comments on the whole topic, owner-occupied, trying to limit what was going on with the exposure. We crafted a law, and actually I had 4 other villages from the south side that asked for a copy of our law because they liked what we had done and would apply to their villages also. So what we had done at the time was really big. Does it need more to be changed a little bit? It could be tweaked. Code enforcement is an issue. We've been advertising for the past 3 years for additional code enforcement officers. We've had nobody apply for the positions. It's a civil service job. We're trying to do that. Right now, we have 4 positions in Village Hall that are out trying to get people to fill those positions. Nobody's applying for the jobs. People don't want to travel out here. Unfortunately, with the housing crisis, they can't live out here. And so there's more money to be made out west than it is out here, which is very hard for us to try to fill these positions that need to be filled. We all know that. The whole village board knows we need to get more people here working on that. One person's out sick and everything comes to a halt. Alex is doing a great job of what he's trying to do. We're doing parking, rental permits, and stuff in the building department and all. He's overworking. He can't work 7 days a week. We know that. We're trying to address it. We just can't find people that are willing to travel out to Greenport to take the positions that we have that we need to fill right now.
I agree, it's also. I agree, it's also, sorry. I agree, it's also a real problem. Kevin has an Airbnb, so he knows the way that the prices that people can get to, for Airbnbs in our village. It is the thing that is driving severe housing shortage for those people that we need to be out here working, as the mayor said. I think that there needs to be better code enforcement, 100%. I think there also needs to be a real relook at the tax structure of how people who are full-time year-round residents here, what it is that they pay in real property taxes versus someone who owns a big Airbnb and ultimately runs a business as an Airbnb. They should be taxed at a higher rate. And certainly the person who simply just owns the property but doesn't live here should be taxed at the highest rate, because that will allow us to generate more funding for code enforcement to make sure that people comply with the law as it's written, because it does need to be enforced, as well as potentially find ways to generate additional revenue to supplement our need to build other reasonable affordable housing.
Rich talks a lot about truth, and there are some things on your website about me that aren't true. I do have a second home across the street that my wife and I bought with the intent of fixing it up for my mother and my mother-in-law. This house was available for rent when you were looking for an address here just a few months ago. Had you wanted a home, you could have rented this for less than what my mortgage is instead of paying the post office costs on your business partner's house. It's rented by a lovely family right now. The woman just moved here with her family as a nurse and is looking for a more permanent place to stay. And it is a longer-term plan for us to move my mother here and also use our family. I have never rented it short-term against the law in any way, shape, or form, period.
I wasn't aware that it was available for rent. I've only seen it on Venmo and Airbnb where it's available for rent if you want to book it for roughly $700 a night in the summertime. So I wasn't aware that it was available for year-round rent. But it is a business. It does seem it comes up clearly as an Airbnb.
Moving on. George, obviously a hot topic. We have heard from many outspoken residents and business owners that the LWRP has not been successfully updated since it was first adopted in 1996 and then amended in 2014. In your 8 years as mayor, what obstacles have prevented this comprehensive plan from successfully moving forward, and what steps have you or will you take to finally bring it to fruition?
Okay, the LWRP, the document itself is over 380 pages thick. We've been working on it just recently. Actually, we had the village attorney and village administrator been working on it for a couple of years, trying to update it and straighten it out. The 2000, what was worked on in 2011, 2012, was submitted to the state. We had a grant to pay to do that. We had the meetings here in the school to discuss that with everybody. The state changed the format of what we had submitted once it was submitted. And then we had to take it back and reformat it and redesign it and send it back to New York State. When that happened and got reformatted, half the pages got corrupted and they were non-readable. The village attorney and village administrator were working on trying to get that all corrected. Some of that, yes, some of that is my fault, the village board's fault for not making that a top priority. We had so many other things going on that we did not stay hot and heavy on it the whole time. So I'll take part of the blame for that. Yes, it was not on the front burner, it was on the back burner. We slowly worked on it. We talk about it every 6 months, where we at with it, where we're making progress. We got through 100 pages, but we're not there yet. So more emphasis should have been put on that all along. That was not done.
Could you repeat the question?
Okay, 1 second. Here we go. We have heard from many outspoken residents and business owners that the LWRP has not been successfully updated since it was first adopted. The question goes to George, is what obstacles has he have prevented the comprehensive plan from successfully moving forward?
I think that, certainly not being in the position of supervising the progress that should have been made with the LWRP. I can only say that, the first LWRP that I read in 1996 was a comprehensive plan that was crafted as a result of doing the work by inviting the public to sit in the many meetings, the many roundtables, the many town halls, to ultimately craft what that LWRP said. It was revised, it was done by way of a firm to assist in updating the more recent version from 2012. So I think the ability or the need to say that, okay, we reformatted it and it didn't quite format properly is a little bit of a pass, it's a little bit of a punt. Ultimately, I've been asking for the status of this LWRP for about a year in terms of when we were going to get it done or get it updated. It was always just kind of dismissed as the village attorney or the village administrator was simply working on some edits. I think the real miss here is that we didn't take the opportunity to, again, engage our residents and stakeholders to really sit down, take a look at it, and examine where we feel like the LWRP is not appropriate for our current 2021-2023 model. So I think the work that's finally being done now to get it to a point where we can all understand it in terms of having it applied to the current standards is appropriate, but it should have been done a long time ago. And I think, again, it's just lack of oversight and supervision in our current administration about making sure it happens.
First of all, I want to commend the mayor for bringing the process forward and ultimately voting for the moratorium. By doing that, it means we are updating the LWRP. Waterfront Advisory Committee was formed with a number of people throughout the community, 13 in fact, 3 different subcommittees were filed, and there have been probably close to about 25 different meetings that have taken place. Together with that, Pace University came down, met with the team, discussed proper planning, and we also had New York State, their LWRP person, come down to discuss the process with us too. Assuming everything moves forward, we should be having public meetings in the next month, 6 weeks, and things will be happening. They're happening because the moratorium was put in place and this community demanded action.
Rich, Village, now that it's 2023 and the LWRP was amended in 2014, do you feel the current uses for commercial, retail, and waterfront zones are appropriate? What changes, if any, would you make to the current LWRP to ensure a successful vision for Greenport's future?
Good question. I think that there continues to be a need to look at exactly what those commercial uses should be. I think there's certainly, we all understand there's a priority to make sure that those working waterfront uses are supported and invested in, that we secure the grants and the funding and the potential investment from outside sources to make sure that that stays in place. I think that there's a lot that we can do to look at supporting our downtown village corridor, business corridor, to incentivize our businesses to stay open year-round, figuring out ways to make sure that we have the family-owned businesses, not the corporate entities that come in here and then shutter their businesses in the fall and then are dark until the springtime. There's lots that we can do to make sure that the downtown village remains vibrant within the LWRP plan, as well as examining what those uses are in the code. All that can be done. Again, I go back to the fact that Pace University had incredible intelligence and foresight and education that they brought to our village. I was incredibly disappointed that we did not offer that opportunity for them to stand up here and speak to you all in terms of how this process should work. It was amazingly insightful. It was actually, they broke it down to be really quite simple. But I'm not really sure why this administration didn't open that up to all of us to hear and listen and learn as to how we should approach this. That should be done going forward. If I'm mayor, that would definitely be done.
Kevin, same question?
There are a number of things with the LWRP and with code.
There are a number of things with the LWRP and code that need to be updated. The subcommittees are working on those right now. Some of the things being considered are whether or not we should have annual rentals within the commercial district. Some of the other things that are being looked at are how we protect our working waterfront. What many people don't know is we only have 4 working waterfront parcels left in the entirety of Greenport Village. That's very frightening to me, and it's frightening to anybody that owns a boat or even to the ferry company knowing whether Steve Clark's boat park will still exist in the near future. One of the things that needs to be looked at is how many more hotels belong within the community of Greenport. Should hotels be as of right within the commercial district, or should they be conditional use that is something that's looked at with a bit more care and a bit more foresight? These are some of the things that need to be taken very seriously, and ultimately all of this will be brought to the community here in due course as part of the process of updating the LWRP and codes.
George, same question?
Yes. Okay, the LWRP is a very complex document. As everybody knows, the demographics here have changed over the past 10 years when it was last reviewed, actually 12 years. I mean, Greenport's a different place than it was 12 years ago when this whole document was worked on. Going through the first 300 or 20-50 pages of it, I've seen a lot of differences with the amount of type of stores, recreation use, everything else. At the time, there was 2 doctor's offices in Greenport Village. There's now 15. Everything is changing, and that's why we need to upgrade that and make that different. The planning said, that's we had from Pace University and from the Department of State that came out here, they asked us not to have a whole group of 100 people there to do that, because we have a group that's in charge of 3 different things through the resolution from the moratorium, and they said, keep it to that core of our planning, zoning, village board, and the people that are on the spearheading committees. So that's what they said, no more than 30 people. So that's why we did it. We didn't open up to everybody, but we will be. The Department of State came out and said, just bring the people that are working on the code and the LWRP, and went through slideshows and everything else to us. They also will be, they haven't sent it yet, but they will be sending out their slideshows. So anybody from the public that wants to pick it up, they can get a copy and see what we went through with that. There are future meetings planned for the 3 groups to get together put all that information together as the one overall waterfront advisory committee is what it's called, to get together, put that all together, and then bring that to the public. So we had something new. We didn't want to just go and rehash the old stuff that was already there that people might not have looked at from before and just start doing that all over again. We want to update all that information first and give you a viable live document from today.
I would just say that, I spoke with the professors after the presentation, and they indicated that they are certainly prepared, if we're willing to pay for it, to provide that broader information and explanation as to what's necessary. They sent me the deck right away when I asked them. I think there just needs to be a willingness to commit in a financial way to get the expertise and the guidance that we all want, that we all need, to make sure that we can plan properly in the future.
Ken, do you own any properties or have vested interests within the village of Greenport or otherwise that would pose a conflict of interest in your decision-making for what's in the best interest of the village? How would you propose to address any perceived conflicts of interest?
I don't own any commercial property on the entirety of the North Fork, nor do I have any partnerships in any businesses on the North Fork, nor do I provide any advice or counsel to anybody with any businesses on the North Fork. I have nothing that would compromise me in serving my duty as your mayor if you choose me to be your mayor. In fact, I will be looking at things from the perspective of somebody who lives here, somebody who walks the streets every morning, going to get coffee over at Sterling Deli, somebody that stands in line, somebody that sits in his backyard having barbecues and is concerned about things that every single person who lives here is concerned about. Thank you.
Same question, George.
The only property I own in Greenport is my home, that I live there with my family, and I have no other vested interest in any property in the village.
I actually own the brewery located, the old firehouse, located on Carpenter Street. We bought that 14 years ago. That's the property that I own within the village of Greenport. I also own property in the town of Southwold, own the brewery in Peconic, as well as my original family home in Southwold town as well. I have some small other interests, minor percentage interests in other commercial properties located in Peconic and the town of Southwold. But honestly, there's nothing that, in terms of my ownership outside the village of Greenport, that would ever create a conflict relative to my ability to serve with my loyalties and my responsibilities to the village of Greenport.
George, we are experiencing an economic climate that has costs rising across the board. If you don't raise taxes, what area of the budget would have to be cut in order to keep taxes at their current rate? Or do you believe that taxes must increase in order for the village to take care of infrastructure and assets, including any new or outstanding bonds?
Okay, that's a very good question. I mean, we're at a point now with, I talked about the employees before, that we don't pay enough money out here for people to travel out this way. We need to up the game, we need to start increasing taxes some. In the 8 years I've been on the board, that I've been mayor, our tax rate, we've gone up 6.3% in 8 years combined. 4 years we've lowered taxes, 4 years we did minimal increases. I feel very strongly that the elderly people, my mother, people like that, the elderly ones, people say, well, it's only a small percentage, just raise the taxes anyway, they'll be able to afford it. Well, some of those people can't afford it. They can't afford the increased taxes, even though it's small, but it might be between getting medicine or food for themselves. So that's why I worked very hard to do that and do the projects we've done with grant money, with other people's money, have them do stuff and invest here so we didn't have to raise taxes. But we are getting to a point now to hire a second code enforcement officer or fill the other positions. We need to increase our salaries village-wide to a percentage that's still underneath the tax cap, but we need to do something to entice people to come out here, to leave the jobs that they're at now, to come here, qualify people, to take over the positions that we need. So it's been something I've been very strong about. I've been adamant about it. We had a lot of money in reserves when I took over. We've used that money to do your roads, your curbs, your sidewalks. Instead of having money in the bank and getting little interest on it, we took that money and invested it in you and in Greenport. And so we're not getting the interest, but now we're getting to the point where we need to do something. So taxes will have to go up in the near future.
Try again. I think it's indicative of the fact that when we find that we can't staff people within our village and we're posting jobs at $14 or $15 an hour and we can't fill those jobs, then it's clear that we need to really look at what we are doing relative to our revenue stream and our ability to fill those positions, not only within the village, but also making sure that our assets and our resources are protected, and we have the appropriate funding to repair them and replace them as needed. I think one of the things we should look at is with our sewer connection fees. You know, the idea of not having increased sewer connection fees for the number of years that we haven't, where we are considering projects outside the village and offering potential contracts to hook those developments up to sewer, and not make sure that we are leveraging that potential development to the fullest extent to generate as much revenue as possible is a miss. I think if ultimately we all want the things that we want and the protection we want, we have to be prepared for a slight increase in taxes where appropriate. That should also mean that we are looking at things like a hotel tax, where we can generate revenue not upon our residents' backs, but ultimately on those people that show up here. I feel like there should be a restructuring of the property tax for Airbnb owners. They should pay more. That is a business. They're running a business within our village. They should pay their fair share. I think we can set up a structure by which our older residents pay less tax. We can figure out simple ways to mirror the STAR and the enhanced STAR exemptions for our older residents. But ultimately, there should be a structure and a complete top-down look at what we need to do to generate sources of revenue, to fill the needs, fill the jobs that are not being filled, figure out a way to do it that's fair.
Number one, I think the biggest opportunity we have, again, as I spoke earlier, is in getting grants and funding from the state and federal government to take care of things that need work over the next 5 to 10 years. If we do that, we will keep these items off the backs of the taxpayers and the homeowners here. As far as raising fees for extending services to entities outside the community, I think it's a fantastic idea. Something that Rich and I agree with, and I believe the mayor does too. What I'm confused about though is, Rich, on your website, it says you're a partner in Silver Sands Hotel, which you didn't mention just a moment ago. And I also understand that the village extended sewer over there.
I should respond to that. I am actually a 0.001. I think I indicated, Kevin, that I own small percentages of other commercial properties within the town of South Pole. I am a 0.0014. It's like less than 1/100th of a percentage owner in the Silver Sands project. However, Silver Sands is connected to the Greenport sewer. It has been for 30 years, 20-something years. So there hasn't been any change in terms of the fact that Silver Sands is still connected to Greenport sewer. Ultimately, Silver Sands is being restored to its original iconic condition, and nothing else has been done there. The village has been intimately involved. I know there's been a lot of smear campaigns and documents that have been circulated, who knows by whom, I guess, about the fact that there are all sorts of bad things that are going on there. But the reality is the town and the village have been intimately involved. There's nothing going on there that's bad. There's nothing that's been done illegally or improperly. And ultimately, that property is going to once again be the iconic location. It won't be a casino. It won't be a wind casino. It won't be a related development, industrial development. It's going to be the original hotel, and it's going to be a lot less than $700 a night, like some Airbnbs.
Okay. Just to continue on what Richard said there about outside hookups to the village and all, the village is in the business of selling sewer, electric, and water. And we do that to make a profit and invest back into the system. The project that was talked about up on the North Road, I know it's controversial, some people didn't like it or whatever, but something's going to be built there anyway. The contract that we had that was talked about that was tabled would have brought in $285,000 to the sewer fund to help with needed upgrades at the Woods Lane plant. Plus, it would have 40 new business customers paying monthly bills moving forward. And there was also half the affordable units in there were going to be designed and designated to people that live in the village in Greenport. That was going to be part of the stipulation that would be there. The developer also was paying for any infrastructure repairs that would be needed to travel from that area down to our existing plant on Manor Place. So that's why, as being a business owner myself, and what I do is good for my business. If we could use somebody else's money and hook that up, it's better for the environment, it's better for our sewer ratepayers now, and overall, it's a good project. The town planning board figures out what can actually be built there. All we were saying was our sewer pipe would come up to the property and it would be allowed to tie into us. That's what we were talking about.
The sewer question will come up later, in case you had something else. Okay. Next question to Rich. Taking into account the village's budget restraints, how would you develop an administrative staff that includes proper building inspection and compliance, code enforcement, and accountability within the village?
I think we've touched on this already relative to continuing to find ways to increase our revenue stream and increasing the bottom line in terms of our budget to prioritize funding those additional resources within the village hall. They have to be prioritized. We have to reallocate whatever the funding may be and whatever our reserves may be to the extent that we can make sure that we have the appropriate staff and resources within the village to serve our community. If we're not doing that, then we're falling down and things are slipping between the cracks. So I would continue to pursue a hotel tax, generating revenue that would allow us to fund our code enforcement. I believe that there could be ways to create paid parking in certain areas that would also change the culture of what we see as plenty of signs around that nobody enforces the parking code. There can be penalties imposed with regard to that. We could also develop additional parking, paid parking locations. So there's plenty of resources that we can avail ourselves to fund those needed jobs, in addition to grants, as well as leveraging developers who may be wanting to hook up the sewers to understand that they have to pay additional surcharges for those sewer connection fees, because if they don't get it, they're not going to be able to develop that property to the extent that they want to. So it would never be a good idea to agree to do something until we know exactly what they intend to do, and then make sure that we're leveraging to the best possible extent what the village needs from that developer.
Same question, and I know we're talking about sewer a little bit, and I just want to read it again. Given the village's budget restraints, how would you develop an administrative staff that includes proper building inspection, compliance, code enforcement, and accountability?
Many times in my career, I found myself needing to take over an organization and do a top-down study of every bit of it. And that's exactly what I would do if I were elected in the office of mayor. I would work with the trustees, and the treasurer, and we would immediately take a look at every single line item within the village budget. We would take a look at every line item that generates revenue, as I said earlier, things like docking fees for all the fancy boats that are out there during the summer. We should be charging something that is more appropriate than what it is right now. We should also be taking a look at items like charging more for sewage if we extend it to developments outside of the village. We should be doing the same thing for parking for tourists during the summer. I believe locals and people like me who live here, we should be able to go to the grocery store and park. We should have a village sticker to park within our neighborhood without issue. But I see no problems charging tourists to park their car down in front of Main Street in the peak of summertime business. At the same time, we also need to take a look at salaries and the equitable division of duties within the village. Our village clerk received a 40% raise from 2018 to 2022. She's making over $100,000 a year. Our village manager makes over $200,000 a year. I think there are things that we need to look at and how the duties are laid out between each one of these people to make sure that we have a proper staff to get things done. We need a building inspector, we need code inspectors, and these things can be done by generating more revenues for the village, as well as enforcing existing laws that are on the books and penalizing people who don't uphold them.
Okay, what Kevin was just talking about, we did that last year. We had public hearings on it, we raised the rates at the marina, at the carousel, and at the campground. Just because we went through that line by line with the treasurer, and the treasurer recommended to us. Our camp counselor has recommended to us that we go and change the rates at our summertime program, which we had that on the agenda at our village board meeting last month. So we are looking at all those items, and we are making the adjustments we have to without making something that's unaffordable for somebody to use the carousel or use the camp, the day rec center or summer day camp. So we don't want to price people out so people won't use it. The kids will be at a loss for it. But we are looking in that direction. We are working on that. Yes, we need more code enforcement. There's no question about it. The village has known that. We're trying to find something that we can go and do it, something that we can afford. Accountability all the way around. We look. I drive around the village every weekend. I have for 16 years, looking at things that's not being done, and I'm contacting the village administrator or the highway department. Say, look, this cop's been out here for a week. It hasn't been picked up. There's other problems. The garbage cans. I hear that a lot. The garbage cans out at Fish Park have not been picked up. And I've talked to the guys numerous times, you have to go down there. If it's half full, empty it. Don't leave a half full can there. Do it every day. So that is the accountability. Some of that I'm doing myself just because of lack of manpower. And new people that are here that don't really know what Greenport used to be and the guys that used to do it. So I'm out there training them. My wife and I, we enjoy our Sunday mornings. I go see mom, I bring her coffee, and we drive around every road in the village. And just look at everything, something my father did for 30 years. It's just something that's inbred in me. I care deeply about Greenport, and we're trying not to break the bank to make it affordable for everybody to stay here. And yeah, we need to charge more to the developers. Well, I mean, we did get a good chunk of change that was coming in on that project, and you said we'll talk about that afterwards. Thank you.
The carousel does not need a price increase, but what we do need is to take care of things that are not generating revenue, like the ice rink that has been sitting out there with no ice on it. This is not an issue of global warming. That's akin to suggesting you need to pull your refrigerator out of your house and put it outside when it's cold to keep it cold. This is an issue of equipment that's failing. There's a village in upstate New York that just got over $2 million in a grant to purchase and install a brand new ice rink. In the entirety of my time in the village, my two daughters who competed in ice skating across the country have never been able to ice skate on the rink. We have a mini train that's been a wonderful gift to this village that is going to be open this summer. I grew up just outside of what's now Silicon Valley and had a train very similar. It was the Wildcat Railroad, opened 3 years before I was born. And my entire childhood, with my sister, my cousins, we all rode that little train. And I'm looking forward to the mayor being able to ride it with his grandkids as well. But we need a plan on what the economics are of running this train. One of our trustees last month suggested we needed to put a plan together of what the budget was, what the staffing needs were, and how much revenue was going to generate. That was turned down. We can't keep kicking the can down the road.
Okay. Speaking of grants, what are some of the grants available to Greenport, and who exactly in the county and state government would you solicit these grants from?
One of the most prominent ones is the one I mentioned earlier. This is through the governor's office, through what was called the Downtown Revitalization Fund. That was a larger grant for larger towns such as Riverhead. Riverhead received over $11 million in just the past year. The governor last year launched a sub-program for that, which was for villages, places where walking is important and people are out of their cars. We qualified for that grant. That grant is divided up by regions. The Eastern Long Island region, we were perfectly set up for that. We could have applied, and if I'm elected, we will apply this year for the $4.5 million we could get from that. There is also significant federal and state infrastructure funding through both the Climate Change Act that Biden and Congress passed last year, as well as I said, Proposition 1 that passed in this past year. I would work very closely with not just South Old Town, I would work with our local Suffolk County legislators, and frankly, I'd jump on the train and I'd go to Washington, D.C. or Albany if I needed to in order to get funding. The 2% iconic transfer tax that's been paid on every single house that's sold within Greenport, it's a massive amount of money. Greenport has not gotten that money back. I don't understand that. I wouldn't take no as an answer. I would go to South Old Town, I would sit there with the community, I'd sit there with the elected officials, I'd bring the press if I needed to. We would demand to get our fair share of money back. Thank you.
Okay. Got it now? Yeah, okay. The village has been very successful in the past 8 years getting grants. We had gotten grants for repaving Main Street, for doing Morse Lane. All the work that was just recently done around the firehouse, 3rd Street Park was done with a grant. We have a grant that equipment is ordered now for new playground equipment at 5th Street Park. We paved 76% of the roads in the past 8 years in the village, and we used over half that money came from grant money that we had gotten to do that. We did $2.2 million in curbs and sidewalks in the past 8 years. That was done with grant money. We used some money, we bonded for some of that, but our bonding went from, in 2015, we had $1.1 million in bonds. As of this year, we have $700,000 in bonds in the general fund. So we're doing the work, keeping taxes low, and using grant money to pay for the repairs and paying down the debt, which is all very positive things that helps the well-being of the village moving forward. The 2% tax, myself and Paul Powers, actually the whole village board, last June 4th, went to the town board with a joint meeting between the two boards, with reporters and everybody there, asking for the 2% money. That was my 5th time I had been there before then with a project to help pay for the upgrade of the sewer treatment plant in the pump station on 3rd Street, which is connected to the sewer treatment plant. It falls within the 20% of the money that can be used for water quality projects by the new state law that was passed 6 years ago. We got stonewalled by the town. I've said this over the past several years, numerous times at meetings. We got stonewalled by that, and legally, we can't just say you have to give that money back. As of last year, when we had that meeting, the village new home buyers had paid in over $1.2 million into that fund, and none of that money has been spent in Greenport. Because they're buying, using it by open land, in Matatuck, Touch Oak, and Southold, and they're not investing that money back in Greenport. We have no open land for them to reserve. So that's why we're trying to get the money, which is qualified under the law, to use that for the water quality improvement on the pump station. Project was $1.5 million, we asked for $750,000, which was still $500,000 less than the home buyers in Greenport had paid into the fund. And we were told no by the town board.
Same question about grants availability.
Yeah, so, I mean, a lot of it's already been said at this point, but, you know, in addition to the state funding and grants that's available. The REDC on the state level is also a source of grants and funding for our village. But I would like to come back to the chronic bay tax, because that is an issue in terms of where the village of Greenport should be entitled to more of that funding. The problem is, I believe, yet again, ultimately that request was made. There was really no follow-up if you look at the actual dates as to what happened for a year relative to how we did not, as a village, go in there and camp out and launch a campaign, public or otherwise, to incentivize or pressure the town to give us more of that funding, because we're certainly entitled to it. I also believe that we should consider bringing back a community resource officer, someone specifically tasked to generate that grant funding, going out and finding those organizations and those municipal and quasi-municipal entities that would be able to help support and offset some of these expenses. There are quasi and private organizations like the Congress for New Urbanism, Innovative Housing Organization, Strong Towns. These organizations have a wealth of access and information and grant opportunities that we should be taking advantage of. We don't have someone specifically tasked to that. I believe our village administrator does most of the grant funding and writing, and he has professed that he's too busy to do everything. So we need to focus on a person whose sole responsibility is to go out there and hunt down this money and secure these grants, because we can do better, and we will.
The mayor's not wrong when he talks about some of these grants that were received for, streets and sidewalks. But picking up pennies, $100 bills are blowing over our head is not a recipe for taking care of this village for the future. We have a skate park that tremendous energy was spent building many years ago. It's in complete disrepair. Moore's Woods, behind the skate park and the new choo-choo train, is a trash ground. Deliverance could be filmed there. It's sad. We should be getting Potomac Bay funds to fix up that gem of a park that belongs to this community. At the same time, we need to get the ice rink replaced and start generating revenue from it, as I said before. We can't let our docks fail, we can't let our bulkheads fail. We have to do the hard work that it will take to get this done, and we can't take no for an answer. Just like I refused to do when we needed to put a moratorium in place in order to get the LWRP updated. Thank you.
George, I'm going to bring up housing in the next question, but before I do, I would like to hear your thoughts on how the 123 Sterling Avenue project was handled. It's a conditional use development that was to include commercial space and additional affordable housing units. However, the building remains empty. Is there anything you learned from this negotiation, or would make you evaluate how to navigate a similar situation in the future?
Okay, I was not on the board when that project and settlement was done. It was an agreement between the planning board, the zoning board, the village board, the developer, and the neighborhood group. And they came up with a plan at that time, 2007, to move the project forward and stop the lawsuits that were going back and forth. Currently, they were allowed to do certain things and had to follow stipulation by the book. Right now, the property is all done, the developer who had it sold it to somebody else, and the new people that have bought it have come to us and say, can we make them rentals instead of buying them? Because when interest rates went up and the market went down, everybody was like, well, nobody was buying it. So the new developers have the property, not I should call them developers, the new real estate agents have the property, the new investors that bought it, and they can't sell any of them. There are the 5 affordable condo units that are for sale, but they said that we can't sell them unless we sell the other units because they're below market rate. And this is where that project is at right now. That's why it's empty, that's why it's sold. I wish interest rates didn't go up and everybody back out from buying it, but that's not something that the village could control. I don't think our waterfront is very dear and near to all of us. On Central Avenue where I lived as a kid, we used to go down there and play snapper fishing at the channel, and we did all that. when those condos went in, that broke my heart. But I wasn't involved in that process. 123 Sterling, I mean, as a vacant piece of land, everybody had a great view. But it used to be a 3-story building that was there, it was a, an oyster factory. And that was there then, the new building, doesn't always fit the neighborhood, but it's a lot better than what it looked like before. The cement buildings are falling down and crumbling. So I would not see any floor parcels that are left on the waterfront. Hopefully none of them ever can become condos. And actually some of the stuff is conditional uses, but a lot of stuff is already outdoor. So planning and zoning right now could just say no if somebody went to those properties and said, I want to do this, and say, no, that's not allowed. And planning board could say no on that. Thank you.
Thoughts on it?
I think for me, the long and short of it is that the agreement that was cut, ultimately by the planning board or negotiated, whatever it may have been, ultimately there was a miss there as well, because the village should have been more involved in acquiring the fact that, the developer and the current real estate entity that owns that building, my understanding is they sold 6 of the 12 units that are listed for $1.2 million for these units. The agreements that ultimately landed where that development was able to proceed to that point that had certain requirements for access of the building to the waterfront and so forth, somebody did not do their job in terms of making sure that those agreements were buttoned up and tight, to make sure that they couldn't just simply sit on this property, let those units go fallow, and not make sure that they're filled with village residents who need places to live. So to me, it was a miss not to be involved in that process. Ultimately, if any development like that were to happen, if I were sitting as mayor, I would make sure that I understood exactly what the expectation was and what the requirements would be and what the obligations would have to be, and I would make sure that they were enforced swiftly.
In order to preserve our future, we have to learn from our past. 123 Sterling was a gross mistake in so many different ways. The wool was pulled over our eyes, there was a little bit of shell game with things, and it's a very unfortunate situation. That is sitting there empty, and none of this supposed affordable housing was built there. We now have the same developer asking for sewage for the corner of the blinking light for a commercial project masquerading as affordable housing. I don't understand why in the middle of a moratorium, where we are not doing any commercial projects within the village of large scale or extending sewage to anybody, we would do it to somebody outside of the village who's showed us there might be problems. Let's wait for South Old Town to do the work that they need to do and bring it back to us as a viable project before we consider selling any sewage rights there. Thank you.
Rich, the current housing crisis within Greenport is not unique to us. However, it has had a significant impact on our community. There is a severe lack of inventory, much less anything that would be considered affordable. It affects businesses' staffing needs and keeps the village from maintaining and growing a year-round community. What plans do you have for creating housing opportunities?
I think the focus has to be to understand that we only have so much space and so many structures within our village limits. There are plenty of innovative approaches and ideas that can be taken, I mentioned before, from the Innovative Housing Organization and Strong Towns. There are ways to create housing, affordable housing, and shared housing that ultimately could help address some of that shortfall. I think also there could be incentives that we can provide to create additional apartments specifically designed for local residents and first responders above the stores that are located on Main Street. I think we could create a program by which if we could have a developer who wants to do something somewhere in the town, they would have to make sure that they are underwriting and funding that type of additional housing so that we can supply the inventory that needs to be supplied. We have, as I say, a lot of the Airbnbs that are in the village that ultimately are businesses. We should make sure that we appropriate appropriately tax them to generate that additional revenue source to help offset those costs. In addition to securing grants and outside funding to make sure that those apartments get built. I think a lot of that can be done with I think it also should be done in conjunction with South Old Town. Because just to say that we need reasonably priced housing within the village of Greenport is not enough. We should make sure that we're engaged with and supporting potential programs in South Old Town that will allow opportunity for local residents and workers to be able to afford housing even somewhat close by, maybe not necessarily the village. But I think it can be a structure by which if we set a kind of a wartime effort goal to achieve a certain amount of housing, we can make it happen.
Housing is an issue in the community. It's not just something Greenport faces, it's something the entirety of the North Fork faces, the South Fork, mountain towns across the country, and many, many other small communities. It's an issue within the cities as well, whether it's New York, Chicago, Los Angeles. We need to take a top-down look at every single piece of available property within the village and make decisions on whether anything is suitable for affordable housing, as well as partner with the local government, the state government, and the federal government to do what we need to do to get the job done, not just within our immediate community of the 1 square mile, but within the larger community of the entirety of the North Fork. As I mentioned earlier, I spent many years working for the largest developer and owner of affordable housing in the country. I have the connections and the ability to leverage these resources, both professional as well as governmental, to work to get the job done.
Okay, right now, is that on? Yes, it is, okay, good. We had a project we were working on called accessory dwelling units in our R2 zone in the village, which comprises of about 70% of the residential properties. And it's called accessory dwelling unit because a person that's living in a big house in the front that didn't need 10 rooms anymore, they could put an apartment above their garage or put a small building in the back. That way they can stay on their own property and rent out the front to make stuff available for larger families. We worked on that. We had a code written on it to change our code to allow that, because right now you only allow one residential building on a piece of property in our R2 zone. It never got out of committee. We never got a consensus between the board with the difference of opinions of how to go about trying to solve this crisis, where we were going with it. We had 6 different versions of it, and we never had a consensus amongst the board of what to do with that. That's why with the bigger group now working on the code, with different opinions and everything else, that with more people working on it, maybe we can get some kind of consensus that we can use as a code to allow these units so people can age out in their home, but they don't need an 8-bedroom house. They can go in a garage apartment. And then 2 families can live in that because you're allowed 2 families in a house. And so that's something that we're trying to do. Besides that, there's not many other alternatives. Downtown is an area we talked about allowing them upstairs. A lot of them right now are allowed by right. They could do that. But the issue came up again, what are you going to do about parking? And when we talked about this at the village board, they said, if you put a family in there, where are they going to play? There's no grass, there's no nothing for the kids to play on. And everybody said, well, that's not a good idea. You know, you got to put 6 people in an apartment upstairs, but then the kids can't get out there. There's no place to put their bicycles, they can't play on the grass, and there's no place to park the cars. So that's some of the roadblocks, and everybody's going to moving forward, is going to have to try to tackle those issues of how you're going to sell this to people that want to be there, and what are they going to do as a family living down there.
Kevin, George just touched upon this a little bit. Would you consider changes to the code that would allow for additional housing upon one's own property? And what kind of criteria would be considered with regards to square footage, parking, and whether it's for year-round housing or short-term rentals?
Number one, I don't believe we need any more short-term rentals. What we need is long-term housing. We need to look at lot coverage within the village and how close we want buildings and homes to be to one another. There have been issues recently where houses have been built right up against each other. Might there make sense to include accessory dwelling units within properties that have the space for a mother-in-law apartment or something like that that could be rented on an annual basis? Absolutely. This is something that needs to be studied very carefully. The planning department needs to be involved, and ultimately the community needs to be involved to make decisions together. As I said earlier, I believe in open government and transparency, and I think these decisions need to be made with the community's input.
George, you've already spoken about it. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, just like to add, there was a piece of property behind my house, on my house, an eighth of an acre. It was a wooded lot that had always been there. I thought it was owned by the person that had the house next door. It wasn't. It was a separate piece of property. They sold that, and a small house got put up on that piece of property, along with a house on Second Street, a small little wooded lot. That people just, any little chunk of land that they can get, they're building on. And there's not many little chunks of land left anymore. That's the biggest issue. So the only way to compromise and do something is to go up. Because we don't have any more real estate, and like places I thought they would never build something on, something's built on now. And that's just the way it's changed over the past 5 years, where people mine whatever they can just to get into Greenport, because it's such a beautiful place to live.
I just would echo the accessory units. That code needs to be updated to provide for accessory units. A unit that's 350 square feet is not really a livable unit. So garages and accessory structures that would afford the ability to allow people to have a reasonable, safe place to live, absolutely we should support that. There are examples throughout the village where people have applied for these opportunities. The code is not consistent, and the determinations are all over the place. We need to finalize and formalize and standardize essentially what those codes should be to allow that to happen. There's also been, and were many years ago, boarding houses that ultimately allowed multiple dwelling units in one structure. The village of Greenport had many of those at one point. We need to figure out ways to afford people who work here, who want to stay here, our first responders, how to be able to live here and be able to afford to live here. So we need to continue to work with the planning department, zoning board, and our comprehensive structure in finalizing the code changes to make that happen.
The following question was about how to create an environment for skilled workers, better paying jobs, and other career opportunities. I feel we've sort of covered that. If not, George,
Can you repeat that again?
absolutely. How would you create an environment for skilled workers, better paying jobs, and other career opportunities within Greenport?
That's something that's been talked about a long time. We all need high-paying jobs. Out here, unfortunately, there's not many of them. I wish we had more places like STID systems. They could sit there, they hire technical people with good knowledge, they have a craft, they're building stuff that's a very useful stuff to the government and everything else. There's not many other places like that besides the hospitality industry and stuff like that. The distillery on 9th Street is outside the village, but still, places like that people have a craft and do something with it is a nice thing. When I was a younger kid, I learned how to do mechanics at my father's garage, something I'm still doing now. At that time, there was 5 garages in Greenport. They're all gone. They've all been converted over to restaurants and other things. So there's not many places for people to work besides the shipyard, halves, STID systems. Those are properties that are left, and we have to do everything possible to make sure those places never leave us, because the people that are working there are making a decent wage. They're beyond just a cashier at 7-Eleven or IGA or whatever. You know, they're trained people that have a skill, and they're really good paying jobs on. And that's what we have to protect, so we don't lose what we have. But where we can create more of them, I wish there was other places we could. I don't know of any other places that we've been looking for something.
I think just quite simply, it's like the ability to encourage those places. And I've spoken to Walter Gazeri, the owner of STID, and his senior staff. They actually have had people get to the point of the interview process to come down and work at that location and then look around for a place to live. It all comes back to housing. Housing is at the top of the pyramid in terms of the problem that ultimately supports everything else we want to do. If we want to invest in job opportunity that is a better paying, higher skilled, longer term craft job, we need to make sure that there are going to be places for these people to live. I think a part of a working waterfront, we all envision what a working waterfront should be. I envision it as being a place where not only would we have the craft people that are doing the boat building and marine work that we see presently, but also encouraging that opportunity to create educational-based opportunities at that working waterfront. Consider figuring out how to house those students and the next generation of people that we want to stay in the area and work those marine jobs and aquaculture jobs. We have to figure out ways to find places for these people to be able to live so that they can get past the point of the training and the skill so that they can then have a pathway to be able to put roots down here and start families.
We haven't protected the working waterfront the way we needed to. The LWRP that is on the state website from 1996 should have been updated over the last 8 years. Had that work been done, whether it was Walter Kazarian potentially expanding what he has and getting his dock rebuilt, which hasn't happened, any of the other waterfront projects, Steve Clark's boatyard and all the funding that he would be able to go out and get, job incentives, those things could have been happening. We have to update the LWRP and incentivize new businesses that do maritime work or aquaculture to come into the village.
Rich, given your years of experience as the BID president, how would you go about bringing the business and residential community together when it's clear the divide still exists?
I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we've continued to face. I joined the BID about 10 years ago after we had opened up the brewery, just simply because it kind of was, again, the way I was brought up. Get involved, step up, see how you can help. I think the divide and the tension between the business district and the residents falls mostly on the fact that the residents don't feel respected by the businesses. I think there can be a lot of instances where that may be true. I think when we begin to look at the villages overall, we have to be realistic from the business side as well as the resident side in terms of what makes our village so amazing. The ability to live in a wonderful neighborhood where you don't have a lot of traffic and congestion and parking and noise is absolutely important. We should continue to figure out ways to make sure that those rights and those interests are protected. But at the same time, we've got to make sure that we keep a vibrant, healthy downtown business district. So we have to figure out ways to incentivize locally family-owned businesses that understand a way to have a path towards success and not necessarily be subject to extreme or exorbitant rents that make it impossible for them to operate. We have to make sure that we support the business district and the downtown corridor in ways that allow people to move around more freely. I want to figure out ways to create a better walking village with walking sheds and bicycle sheds in terms of connecting our village to Southwold and beyond. I would like to pursue a way to create a bike path from the Greenport Village to Southwold Town. But the key is to try and remove the parking, redirect the vehicles to a point where they don't necessarily congest our residential streets and neighborhoods. Make sure our residents have the ability to park by way of parking stickers. Work on making sure that we can continue to work together towards a common goal.
I think community engagement is extremely important. I've spent my career in business, but as I said earlier, I will always look at things from the perspective of somebody who lives here and makes his home here. My belief is the community needs to partner with the BID just as the BID does with the community. I'm hopeful that the next BID president will put their arm out to work with the community. That's something that needs to happen. We talk about empty spaces. The biggest empty space right now is the old suite indulgences, as I said earlier. I pick up the phone. I call the developer who owns the Harborfront Hotel in Soundview and said, you need to do something. You're not engaging with the community. Why have you kept this open and empty for 1.5 years? At the same time, let's talk about the arcade. What has the village or the bid done in the past 10 years, or however many years it's been sitting there empty? It's the talk of everybody in the village. If I'm elected, I will make certain that the board and the trustees immediately do what we have to enact a tax on somebody who keeps their space empty and doesn't make an effort to either rent it or clean it up. Number two, any empty space will also be required to make certain that their windows are decorated beautifully. I partnered with the Greenport School, the art program here, to have the students doing things to beautify the windows. That would be a code requirement of an empty business sitting there, whether it's the arcade or sweet indulgences. It's time to clean up the streets, hold people accountable, and get things done.
Okay. Certain businesses, they have a legal right to what they're doing. The village cannot tell them you have to do this with your vacant property as long as you're paying your taxes and it's not a health or safety hazard to other people. We've tried to get owners of the arcade to do something for years. They don't want to budge, they don't want to sell, they don't want to do anything with it. We cannot take the property from them unless we want to go eminent domain or something that drastic. You can't just tell the person they have to do it, but we've tried to come up with different uses and help them with things. They just don't want to budge. We've got a couple other blighted houses in the village that we've tried to work on. They're in court, some of them have been in court for 4 or 5 years. And places are a little cleaner, but they're not cleaned up all the way. It's not something that we've been able to be successful with. The judges are allowing things to go on, they can get continuances, and it's going on for years. And I think it's disrespectful to everybody in the village for the judge not to help us try to clean up properties. There are residents that live in some of the side streets behind Main Street that feel hostage in their own homes on weekends. They won't go out here after 10 o'clock on a Saturday because they won't be able to get back and park in their house again. That's part on the businesses. That's what we need to put some of the stores out of the residential neighborhoods and get them to Moore's Lane or to the parking lot down by the train station or someplace else. So those people can feel comfortable running to the drugstore if they have to and be able to get back home. A lot of the houses on Bay Avenue, Central Avenue, they don't have driveways, so they have a driveway for one car. If you got two, you've got kids at the house, whatever, you have more vehicles and they park on the street. When all the employees go there for a 4-hour shift, I mean, an 8-hour shift at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they're coming after they've done work at midnight, waking people up, making a mess, throwing garbage on the ground and all. And the business district has to be more respectful and help out the neighborhoods on that kind of thing. And tell their employees, don't bring yourself downtown, leave it here, give them a garbage can. Our garbage cans downtown are full all the time, but some people use it. Other ones, they're just leaving stuff along the neighborhood where they go. And I see it firsthand a lot, and we need to do better to combine so the village residents can survive with the businesses. We need strong businesses, but the residents shouldn't be hampered by just business.
Kevin, what actions would you take to create and maintain a cooperative and reciprocal relationship with our surrounding municipalities that would elevate a prosperous vision that benefits us all?
I've already been doing it as a community member. I've gotten to meet a number of people who work in South Old Town government and have spent time with them and work with them as a community member. I have relationships at the state and the national level as well. And I believe in always extending an arm, picking up the phone, going to lunch, and trying to solve problems together. Instead of this back and forth between Sag Harbor and Greenport on the jitney, I'd pick up the phone and I'd ask the mayor of Sag Harbor to come over, or I'd go over there and say, let's sit down and talk about this. What makes sense? I'd get the community involved. I'd hold a joint meeting. These are things that need to be happening. We can't simply roll over the second somebody doesn't want to engage with us. You gotta try again. Thank you.
What actions would you take to create and maintain a cooperative and reciprocal relationship with our surrounding municipalities that would elevate a prosperous vision that benefits us all?
Okay, right now we have a program with South Old Town with their pump out boat that's being used. They've actually got a brand new pump out boat, and Greenport helped them get that by using our population and the marinas and our waterfront for them to get the pump out boat. We've tried to work on that. Shelter Island has offered their boat to go over and use this pump out station in Mitchell Marina, trying to work on that so that they can go and keep the water cleaner from the boats in the harbors and everything else. We've worked with Southtown Police when we've had issues with code enforcement and other things. They actually created another sector just for the village now. It's helped, but we still, the people doing U-turns and stuff like that, everybody sees it downtown. Our outlets cannot do that. That's a VAT violation. And we need more police presence. We actually need them to write more tickets. Not that I want people to be getting tickets, but the only way to stop some of the other activities that people complain to me about all the time is asking for better enforcement from our local police department, which we all pay taxes to. The ferry service to Sag Harbor, the concept sounds like a nice concept and everything else. Some people will use it, some people did the past. I don't believe the ferry should be coming into Mitchell Marina. With the big boats and everything else going on down there, there's no place to park. If people are gonna park somewhere else and walk down there, they're leaving their car in a residential neighborhood or in the IGA parking lot, or whatever's closest, to go there, go to Sag Harbor for the day, and then come back. If the city would go with what we propose as a village, to use the visitors dock down on the other side, right by where the buses come in, and use that terminal there to do something there, they can remodel what they need for the dock, and do that on their own, then we could talk about that. We've asked Sag Harbor in the past, do you have any agreement or anything else? No, we're waiting on you. So Sag Harbor was waiting on us to do something to try to get the city working, and we're kind of waiting on them. And so we definitely need to have closer communication, and I want to rely on the assistance of other municipalities around us.
I actually haven't been in the community about 34 years. I actually personally know Anthony Palumbo, Fred Field, Al Krupski, have good relationships and friendships with all of these folks, and they're good people, and have the ability to pick up the phone and get them on the cell phone and talk about what needs that we might have. That's an important component to make sure that in the intermunicipal type of relationship, we have to make sure we continue to build those bonds and that level of communication. I know everybody on the Suffolk Town board. I think the village did conduct one session this past year where they actually had a joint session, and that's something that needs to happen regularly, because only through that type of communication and engagement can we appreciate and understand each other's needs, concerns, and wants. And that level of communication is what's going to serve our interest, where we don't let things slide for a year or longer with no results. So if I were elected, I absolutely would employ all of those avenues, all the way up to the state level, ESD, people in Albany as well, that we could get the results that we need, priorities can be addressed, and we can make things happen for certain.
We've touched base on this. George, what are your views on how the village should manage allocating sewer capacity to new developments outside of the incorporated village? Do you think the village should consider potential future development within the village, including housing development, and allocating sewer capacity to developments outside the village?
Okay, some of that I had already talked about. We supplied sewers to Vineyard View with 50 affordable units on the North Road, which if they didn't have sewer and they had to go on cesspools, they would have only been able to do 25 units. So it made a difference having the sewer up there and us making that available to them. In our sewer plant, we're running at about just under 60% capacity. So with the upgrade that was completed some years ago, and everything was done to reduce nitrogen, but also to upgrade the capacity of the plant, there's more than enough capacity for now. We're just over halfway. So there's plenty of room for any additional development and all. I'm not pro-development per se, but something we can do for more affordable housing. If you're going to try to do a complex and it's going to be all on cesspools, you're limiting the amount of stuff that you can do. Cesspools is a commodity, the sewer is a commodity to us, and we are in the business to try to promote that. And if it's a viable project, I think we should be using that. We need to keep at least 25% of capacity for anything future in the village, but as you said, most of the village is built out. To do an apartment above one of the stores, you're talking a minimal amount of usage for for a family of 3 who's gonna be up there for, living there full time. So we do have the capacity, and certain development, if it's all approved and everything else, it's upfront money that we get, plus we get customers for life, and that's how we help pay for upgrades and stuff that needs to be done. Plus paying down the debt from the last upgrade we did, money we got from the Conic Landing, definitely helped us as an outside connection, but they're one of the biggest employers on the North Fork now, and it's a place for elderly people to live, and they get the companionship that they need, and a lot of that was because of what we had available to offer them, and it's better for the environment up there on the sound, but also it creates hundreds of jobs, and it was good overall for everybody, in my opinion.
I know it was a long question. It's 2 hours in here. So.
Yeah. What are your views on how the village should manage allocating sewer capacity to new developments outside of the incorporated village? Do you think the village should consider potential future development in the village?
So projects like the Sandy Beach project, I think make all the sense in the world in terms of a project within the village. That's a sensitive environmental area. Extending sewer capacity to Sandy Beach makes perfect sense to me. I think that the thing is, it's such an incredibly valuable asset that we have as being a village with a sewer system. We really need to make sure that we're incredibly prudent about offering that to any type of development outside the village. As I said before, I think the most important thing we need to consider is leveraging to the absolute ultimate point we possibly can the benefit of what we want in exchange for that service. We should really look at increasing our fees to drive more substantial revenue from these hookups. 2 projects that we know what they're going to be. And I don't see any reason why we can't leverage and include those ability for those hookups to require certain aspects of additional affordable, reasonable housing development from these developers. So I think there's a lot that could be done to maximize the fact that this is an incredibly valuable asset that we should be making as much as we possibly can on for the benefit of the rest of the village.
I don't believe in shooting from the hip to make decisions when something needs to be studied carefully. The moratorium law, as drafted, passed unanimously by the Mayor and the Board of Trustees, specifically states that this is an issue that needs to be looked at very carefully. We need to determine what the needs are going to be for the village over the future. That doesn't mean the next 2 years, 5 years, or 10 years, but the next 20 and 30 years. Hard stop on extending anything for the moment. At the same time, what needs to be done is we need to study what other municipalities charge for selling their service. The mayor says $285,000 was offered by the developer for sewage rights over the blinking light. Is that the right number? Maybe it's $500,000, maybe it's more. We don't know that to answer that question. We need to study it and make an informed decision. At the same time, the golden egg here is our waterfront. There is no Greenport without a healthy and safe water. The Peconic Bay is considered one of the most critical and endangered areas in the entire New York region. The Pikes Cove area in particular is considered the most sensitive of the entirety of Peconic Bay. You have natural springs there and wetlands of both salt and fresh water. We need to prioritize if we're going to be offering sewage to places that are going to protect our bay. That may mean that we make some decisions to work together with residents who have houses along the water, like at Sandy Beach. But at the end of the day, it needs to be studied, and it needs to be studied very carefully to determine A, what we charge for it, and B, who should have priority to get sewage rights on our very precious resource that we own as residents of Greenport.
We're about 2 hours in, and I have 2 more questions, and I want to leave time for audience participation, so if we could get through these last 2 quickly. The password is parking. A decades-old problem. What are your thoughts and ideas to improve the situation, and would it involve technology?
We've kind of touched on this before, but I think that there could be much improvement with the way that vehicles enter our village. We can create traffic patterns, additional clear signage that allows people to understand that they don't have to meander through our residential streets or neighborhoods in order to look for parking. If we made more clear, more certain, the signage that directed those people over to the jitney parking lot, to potentially setting up off-site parking in Moore's Lane. I would encourage and support creating a free shuttle that would run back and forth to keep people out. But I would also employ technology that would be like a park mobile system, something that allows people to park, register their car, pay the particular parking fee, have the ability to extend it for a reasonable period of time, not all day. We need to direct our employees that work in our local businesses to be able to park outside the village. I think Claudio's at one point was trying to set up that process where their employees would park down at the high school. Actually, they rented 100 spots out here. So we need to continue to find ways and look at the innovative technologies that would support that process. People talk about a parking garage. Nobody necessarily wants to see a parking garage anywhere in the village. But we need to make sure that we're designating those areas where people that are traveling in from the village can park easily, but also make sure that we prioritize that our village residents have free parking stickers and that they are designated areas that have severe fines imposed if they were to park in a residential zone and instead of an area that's designated for out-of-town visitors and tourists.
Number one, we need to prioritize the community and the people that live here. They need parking stickers and should be able to park in front of their house and at the grocery store. Number two, we need to charge visiting tourists in the peak summer rates. They have no problem paying $500 or $700 a night for a hotel room. They should be paying for their parking. Number three, signage. People get confused. I live down at Clark Street at the bottom of 4th. I get people coming down there all the time wanting to know where the ferry is or where are they going to park. Clear signage. And another one is incentivizing people to park in an appropriate place and get out and walk. We have a walking problem too. And that is something through proper communication, we get the tourists out of the cars, stop them from driving around, and get them parked efficiently.
Okay, we've had fellowships here, we have Maritime Festival, we have a lot of things go on. And we always try to say, park on Moore's Lane, we put signs up there, park at the high school. We've asked people to do that. Most people by nature want their car close by to them when they're going downtown and doing stuff. We need to break the culture of that and have people carpool and do this stuff and use places that are clean and accessible to do that. Several years ago, we put out a process, but we haven't gotten approved by the DEC for Munsell Trail. There's a wide road that connects Woods Lane with 3rd Street or North Street, down to 3rd Street. And being able to park there. We had Chatty Allen's, everybody knows Chatty, and she brought that up to me at a meeting. Saying, why can't you park cars on one side of that? Along that road, you can probably fit 100 cars parked there. We've talked to the DEC about it. We have not gotten anything approved for it yet because it's partially wetlands, but a lot of it isn't. The south side that's along the school property is not as much wetlands. And if we can get 50 cars to park up there, people can walk down 3rd Street, they're right at the town. It's a couple blocks. It's no longer than they would park for Maritime Festival when they park up by my house and they're in the hospital parking lot. So it's not that much farther. So we can go and lobby and try to get the DEC to allow us to use part of that land that we own right there and make a parking area up there. I think that would help the parking area. And more carpooling and trolleys, people coming in my group, a bus, because I know Shelter Island, the ferry traffic, Shelter Island School got a van from the town and used their seniors van. So people could walk onto the ferry, they'll pick up 8 people at a time and bring them up to the school, because the teacher would leave for work every day. So we had a couple of vans that could do that, one of the taxi companies would run a van in and out every hour or something like that, with people parking elsewhere. It'd be a new business for somebody, and hopefully that will work and alleviate some of the downtown parking.
This is the last of the moderated questions. Kevin, a recent survey found that economically successful small towns were those with interesting amenities. Greenport has them, but many are neglected. For example, the ice skating rink, the camera obscura, the Woods, the carousel will need additional work, and we all know how I feel about the skate park. How will you preserve and enhance these charming features of Greenport?
As I said earlier, Greenport is at a crossroads. I'm running, and 6 other new candidates are running for office because we believe we need some change. We have many items that you talked about, and I mentioned earlier, that need work. We can't keep kicking the can down the road on some of these items, and we have to get them fixed, and we have to protect what makes Greenport so special. But at the same time, we can't allow developers to come in and make decisions for us. If we get our LWRP updated, we can start going for more of these grants to get these things fixed. We have tremendous community spirit and engagement on whether it's rebuilding the skate park that's laid fallow for years, or restoring the movie theater and purchasing it or having it donated along with a beautiful endowment for the community to use that too. These are 2 things that would be a meaningful improvement to current day. Let's get the ice skating rink replaced and working again. That's something that people will come all over for in the colder months when we don't have a lot of business. There are many other things that we can do, including as part of rebuilding our working waterfront, bringing other new interesting things here to the village that make sense and play off the working waterfront and marine science. Thank you.
Okay, the village needs to do a better job on some of the projects that we have, some of the parks that we have. Rita, you've done a great job with the skate park. I commend you for what you've done. I would like to appoint a committee from the village, a liaison that we have for the fire department, the carousel to the bid, to have a true liaison from the village that would answer monthly for everything that the skate park needs. There's been some communication issues that we paint one thing and it's not the great thing to paint. I'm not a skateboarder, so I would not know. I would like to make the job that you do easier and make it better and make sure that the park is kept up in a good fashion. The camera skirt is something it's a very nice building. It's something that people don't use. We've had volunteers before that could explain what's going on so people could understand it and all. I would not be able to do that myself. And we're looking for somebody that would actually go and sit there and explain it to people and see if it could be used more. That would be a good asset to us. The building is there. I would like to see it to be used more. We just don't have anybody that can do that. The other thing, the ice rink, we're talking about that. We know the unit that's there now is 19 years old. It does not work. You know, the weather is not conducive for that. We've already talked to Susan Storr, who's a lobbyist for us, to try to find grant money and Parks and Recreation funds from the state and federal government to put in a permanent base for the ice rink. So you have 3 foot of cement that's cooled underground instead of trying to put ice on top of the warm ground with no frost in it. It's somewhere from $1 million to $1.5 million. I have other people that are willing to help us and work on grants that worked on putting in the original ice rink. That would be a huge asset to the village. That's something that's going to be usable more than a week a year or 2 weeks a year. It's a lot of time setting it up. It's a lot of expense to the taxpayers, but it's something that people do enjoy. Even when it's open for the 7 days this year, the kids and the hockey clubs really enjoyed it. So we really need to make that, upgrade that to a more permanent structure, and we're going to try to do that with the grant.
In addition to, the comments that were made about the ice skating, which I completely and wholeheartedly support, we are able to put men on the moon or have put men on the moon. There is a fact to be, without a doubt, and it's interesting to hear the mayor comment about it. The ability to create that skating park in a way that is much more sustainable and effective and operational with reliability, absolutely, I would dedicate whatever percentage of our effort, time, and bonding that we have to do to make that so. I think it can serve in ways beyond even the skate park. That brings such animation to our downtown village. It's an attraction that everyone loves. We all have memories and stories of bringing our young kids there to skate. We sponsored hockey clubs that played on the skating rink. So that's something that 100% has to stay in Mitchell Park. We got to figure out a way to make sure that it works reliably. I think other assets like the skate park down in Moore's Lane, 100% behind continuing to support ways to renovate that, restore that, to keep it even more viable for young people to come visit and skate park, skate at. Things like our historic jail next to the brewery. I can't tell you how many people walk up and knock on our door and ask us, do they ever open this up? Do they ever do anything with the jail? We offered at one point to fund the entire renovation of that jail. Unfortunately, the village did not take us up on that opportunity. So we've seen that jail fall brick from brick in terms of its, its condition, which is a crime. Those type of efforts, I think we can enlist private funding to sponsor renovations, to make sure that the public has access to those assets. People can enjoy them more, including Canada Obscura. When you think about what Mitchell Park was before it became Mitchell Park, it's possible. We just need to focus our efforts on it, and then we can get it done.
You'll each have a minute for a closing statement, and we'll start with George.
I just want to thank everybody for coming here tonight. It's good seeing everybody around. It's good answering questions. It's good having an open debate with everybody. Make sure you show up and vote on the 21st. That's the most important thing about all of this. Everybody needs to show up and vote. You make your choices. Best man wins. The village will move forward. I appreciate all the support I've had since I've been on the board. 16 years has been a long time. I enjoy it. I'm still enjoying it, and it's something I can keep accomplishing for all of you. So please show up and vote for whoever, trustee and mayor. Make sure you show up. That's the key part, and then the community will hear what they want.
I'd like to thank everybody for turning out. This process, I've never run for an elective office before, so this process has been truly enlightening. Certainly, we are, I think, all aware of the difficulties we've had to get to this point, and I'm hoping that it resolves in a way that allows the rest of all of the challenger candidates to be considered in a fair and open way. And I, too, would also say that it's important that everyone turn out. I think there's roughly 900 to 1,000 voters in the village of Greenport, so hopefully we have a strong turnout in voting. I would just say that, I've been here again 34 years in this community. I'm trying to check all the boxes in terms of what people are concerned with and be. I think if you look at my record and you understand the level of my community involvement, you should be able to see that I have no ulterior motive here. I don't really even need to honestly say that I would take a salary. I just really want to make sure that the village is transparent and works well and serves our community to its best possible extent. Thank you.
I've heard from the community, and what the community has told me is that we need to protect this place that we all feel is so special. As part of protecting it, we need a fresh start. Leadership starts at the top, and if you're going to get things done, you need to lead, and you need to put a plan in place. We have a devoted group of trustees who are currently in office, and we will likely have 2 more potentially this coming year, or potentially 1 if 1 is reelected. We also find ourselves at a crossroads as it relates to the election. Many of you may have heard that 7 of us, were disenfranchised. I want you to know that I have a plan for that too. You're going to see in the coming days, if we find out that for some reason the Supreme Court rules and does not allow us to be on the ballot, that we will have a write-in campaign. And as the mayor said, I urge every single one of you to make certain you get out and vote and write in our names properly if you vote for one of the 7 for change for Greenport and new leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, all 3 of you, and we appreciate the time that you've given all of us. I want to open up the floor to the audience for questions. I do want to clarify one that came across my table. George, you had mentioned that you're having difficulty getting the 2% component, the transfer tax back to us. Kevin, you then suggested that you demanded And how exactly would you get that back for us?
I would engage with the town of Southwold, and I would spend the time, energy, and effort together with the elected officials there and our elected officials here, and I would also bring the community into it if we needed to. I don't believe in taking no for an answer when something is ours because we have paid into it.
Thank you. We have a podium up here for anyone who would like to ask any of the candidates a question. Please keep from personal attacks and please keep it to any subjects we haven't already discussed. And as I mentioned as we started this evening, we do have a second debate. Anything that could possibly be held to that second time, please consider that. I know it's been a long night, but the mic is open for anyone who wants it. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all for coming.
See you. Thanks for hanging out.